What's an educated mama?
Hello, I'm Ryan Jordan, and welcome to the Educated Mama. During this podcast, we will learn from experts, entrepreneurs, creators, and leaders who are also mothers responsible for all the things. Let's celebrate women, learn a few mom hacks, and discuss the beautiful mess of motherhood. We're all learning together, right? Today's guest is Blair Nelson, and we will be talking about infertility and pregnancy. Blair is an Austin-based entrepreneur that juggles her corporate career in commercial real estate with her passion for serving the infertility community. Blair created Fab Fertility, her personal Instagram account that is now also a blog and podcast to document her journey and to educate, inspire, and empower others suffering infertility to build their families. She has also created Fab Motherhood, and she co-founded Fertility Rally. This soon-to-be mama has 7 chickens, 4 dogs, and a cat, and a lot of love to give. Let's meet our guest. Hi, Blair. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hello, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. I think this conversation will resonate with a lot of our mamas that are listening, or soon to be mamas, or people wanting to be mamas. So I just would love to jump right in with you and talk about your personal journey. I know I've read about it and I've seen a lot of posts on your Instagram account. You've been so gracious and open, and I would just love for you to share your journey with us.
Yes. So my husband and I got married in 2017, and we knew right away we wanted to start trying to have a family. And we joke because I had been, I thought I was really on top of things. I had been off birth control for a couple months. I was charting my cycles, doing the apps and all the things. And when we went on our honeymoon, I was like, ooh, I'm ovulating on the honeymoon. Wouldn't that just be so cool if we got pregnant in Maui? And I laugh at it now because had I known what we were about to face, I would have not even dreamt that would be a possibility. But it's funny because anybody listening that has gone through any sort of infertility, that like ignorance is bliss. I miss those days where I thought I could get pregnant on my honeymoon. I miss the days where I was tracking my ovulation and like having sex at home, trying to get pregnant. I mean, I'm just like, wow, I was just so blissfully ignorant back then. Now I know way more about my body than I ever want to know. But anyway, so pretty quickly into our marriage, I'd say 6 or 7 months in, and nothing had happened yet. I told my husband, I was like, I think I'm going to go to the OB-GYN and just tell her, hey, I know I'm not over 35 and we haven't been trying for 12 months, that the old school archaic parameters they put on you for seeking intervention. But I do want to bring it up because I want to be more proactive. I am not a patient person. I never have been. I like want what I want when I want it, So I went to my OB and she kind of brushed me off, to be honest. And she said, try for 12 months. At the time, I think I was 31 or 32. And just like, just give it some more time. Well, I literally was either Googling other OBs or texting my friends, who should I switch to, as I was leaving the building. I was like, that's not acceptable to me. I want somebody to partner with me and help me achieve my parenting goals, not kind of hold me back. So I switched to another OB, and he was wonderful. He was super proactive. He suggested that we run some just basic tests on my husband and myself. Meanwhile, my husband had unfortunately lost his father about 1.5 years prior. His mother passed away in high school. And so we have all this stuff that parents collect for their children that you don't typically get until way later in life, like all your medical files and your old kindergarten art and all the things that your parents hang on to that are like so special to them. So anyway, we were going through some stuff one day, and we found a medical file on my husband. And we found this letter in there talking about how there was something up with his chromosomes. And I couldn't even tell you what it said. It was like on a typewritten letter, like from a typewriter in the 80s. And we're like, well, we'll just take this in, when we go into our next appointment. So because of some of the test results and because of this letter, 8 months into our marriage, we're sitting across a desk from a reproductive endocrinologist, and she's telling us IVF's the only way we're going to have children. So my husband has a genetic, he was born with I don't want to call it, I guess I couldn't call it a genetic condition, but it's called a balanced translocation. And that means that 2 sets of his 26 chromosomes perfectly have flip-flopped when he was conceived. So he's perfectly normal. But when you go to procreate, when you have a balanced translocation, a lot of times those embryos that you end up making have too much genetic material or too little genetic material. It just makes it harder for everything to line up. So, luckily, I count our lucky stars that we found out randomly through that file. Otherwise, we would have not known. We would have been trying and trying and trying. A lot of people that don't know they have a balanced translocation end up having repeat pregnancy loss. If they carry to term, the baby dies soon after birth. So I'm really thankful we didn't have to go through all of that. So we did our first round of IVF. We went right into IVF. So most people, if you're listening and you've had some fertility struggles, it's like you try at home, then you try with like a little Clomid or Letrozole or Femara, then you go on to IUI. Then no, we were like 0 to 60. And so in 2018, we did our first retrieval, and to make a very long journey short from there, we only made normal embryos genetically. So the whole reason you have to do IVF with a balanced translocation is to test out any unbalance. So our first round, we made 4 normal, and we exhausted all of those. We transferred 3 of them. They didn't work at all at separate times. We had 1 miscarriage, early miscarriage in 2018. And then we did a second round of IVF, meaning the full kit and caboodle, the retrieval, the testing, no normal embryos. Same with round 3, same with round 4. And then with round 5, so that brings us from May of 2018 to May of 2020, we finally made normal embryos again. And you can imagine along the way, it was just an emotional roller coaster. So many times one of us would want to give up, lots of arguments, a lot of financial strain, all the things, which I'm happy to get into if you want to ask me about that. But it was a wild ride. And we switched doctors in there, had several procedures, surgeries, just to try to figure out what the heck was going on. Because at that point, there was something wrong with me too. I mean, the fact that I couldn't sustain a pregnancy with a normal embryo was kind of suspect. So we did a lot of testing on me as well. So then finally in May in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, we finally made some embryos, transferred in August 31st of 2020. And that is the little girl that I'm pregnant with now.
That is so exciting, and congratulations. I mean, I'm listening on the edge of my seat while you're telling the story, and I'm just so happy for you that after this entire journey that you have your baby girl and she's growing, and and you're due very soon. So you're in your 3rd trimester, correct?
Yeah, I turned 32 weeks yesterday. Mm-hmm.
That's such a blessing. That's amazing. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
This journey you've been on, I mean, when you were like, and we found this piece of paper from the 80s that said this, I'm like, what did it say? Because even reading that, this is a first. I haven't heard of. Tell me the name again. It's
a balanced translocation.
And do people normally test for this? I mean, I would think people test for it now because we know everything, but back in the 80s, they were testing for this?
So that's what's so frustrating about our journey is we can't ask because his parents aren't here.
Yeah.
So we can't ask the backstory, right?
Like, what was the reason they got this test done?
Right.
This is like a hidden mystery,
Yeah, it's totally like a treasure hunt. It's crazy. But yes, to answer your question now, if you get to the point where you as a couple, or if you're doing IVF solo or whatever the case may be, if you get to the point of IVF, the testing that a reproductive endocrinologist would do in your karyotyping screening prior to doing a retrieval and things would test for a translocation. Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about your whole journey, because I have, friends who are near and dear to my heart that have gone through the Clomid, and they've gone through the transfers, and they've gotten their embryos, and then they don't have viable embryos. And I mean, it's a constant journey. And I just want to ask you about that piece of it, because, there's that beginning moment where you're like, I'm struggling with infertility. And then there's that other moment where you're like, congratulations, you're pregnant. And then you have a miscarriage. And then you go through it again, and then you are now pregnant. So I'm just curious to know, if you don't mind me asking, besides feeling like defeated and all of those things while you're going through this and strain on your marriage, I mean, you were only 8 months into your marriage when all of this took place. Do you have any advice for couples that are newly married and going through this?
Yes. My advice is something that we waited way too long to do. And that is to find a couples therapist that specializes in infertility. It's it's hard for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, I think it's when you get thrown into treatments, it's so overwhelming, and it's so scientific, and it feels so above your head. So it's overwhelming in that regard. But then you have to figure out how to pay for it. And as we all know, insurance in this country is terrible, especially for infertility. So that's one piece. Emotionally, you're like, oh my God, like you start questioning so many things. You start questioning your identity. Like my whole life, I thought I was going to be a parent. Now, what if I can't be? And then you start, there is resentment that comes in. Like you don't want it to, but you're just like, oh God, like if this wasn't wrong with him, would this be hard for me, or vice versa? Then when it doesn't work in your own body, then you start feeling like your body is failing you as a couple. And also then when it comes to loss, like you said, when we finally thought, oh, this is over, this was relatively easy, all things considered with IVF, we got pregnant on our, second transfer. We've only been doing IVF for 4 months total. We thought we were so lucky. And then you have a loss. Then everyone grieves differently. And my husband and I are very opposite in the way that we do most things. I mean, personalities and everything. So the way we were grieving was different. And the way I was grieving was that's when I started Fab Fertility. I needed to put my story out there. I needed to write out my feelings. I needed to sit in them and feel them, and also to share. I needed to find somebody, people who understood what I was going through. And he has the opposite way of coping. And we were like, God, we just can't even see eye to eye on something that's so intimate and so terrible that we both went through. So anyway, I remember I went to dinner with a couple of my friends a few months after the miscarriage, and we were already back starting doing treatments again. And one of them was like, y'all should just go to therapy, Blair. I mean, y'all are going through so much stuff that why not just go and like have a place and a time to talk about all these hard things. Because what also ends up happening is one of you's thinking about it all day for whatever reason. Then you come home and you bombard the other with talking about it when they kind of feel backed into a corner because they haven't time to mentally prepare for the conversation. So for that reason, it was great. It was also wonderful for us to learn to respect how the other one was coping. And we've come a long way with all of that. And, it's really cool because most of the couples that I talk to and that I've gotten to know through all of this will say they feel like their marriage is stronger or their partnership is stronger coming out of this. Now, it does ruin some relationships, and that is so unfortunate, because something that starts out as you're doing something because you love each other can end up tearing you apart is really, really sad. But I would say for the most part, what I hear is that it brings people closer together. It kind of forces you into this close bond. And, you know, my husband will say stuff like, I can, he's like, if I'm getting a scan, he's like, I can count your follicles. I know what your anatomy looks like. Like, you know, it's crazy. It's so wild.
Yeah. I think honestly, those moments in marriage where you go through really traumatic things, you know, can separate you, but you're right. They can also bring you together. I mean, I completely understand about grief and grieving differently. I myself had miscarriages, chemical pregnancies, and heartbeats that didn't go on to heartbeats at the next appointment. And I suffered greatly with that. I didn't have my first baby until I was 37. And, you know, the way I grieved over that was my dream of having 4 kids is whittling away, right? Like I have all these dreams and aspirations, and it was my body, and I'm going through this. And my husband was the same way, where I remember my first miscarriage, it was so not talked about that I'll just share this. I was on a phone call, right? Like on a conference call, bleeding out. And it was so not talked about at that time. And I was in a job where I had to be super professional, and I was talking on this meeting, and I was just like, okay. And then I miscarried, and I didn't even call my husband at work because I didn't want to burden him. I called his parents.
Oh.
And it's so funny because now that it's so talked about, you know, 7 years later, my first miscarriage was 7 years ago. Gosh, if I knew now, I would have called him right away and said, come home. This is just as much of a grieving experience for you, but I also can't expect him to understand the grief if I don't let him into the grief.
Yeah.
You know, where if you are acting like, oh, it's okay, you know, everything's going to be okay. You try to convince yourself of things, and no, it's okay not to be okay. And letting people into that space actually creates space for people to support you better.
100%.
So, yeah. And it's a journey to go through. And I think about everybody that's still going through it right now. And that's what I want to talk about next, is that you created this community. And I want to hear more about Fab Fertility, and I want to hear about all of the community that you've created because of this.
Fab Fertility started out of a moment of desperation. Like, I was in a dark place. I was in a bad way. My husband didn't understand my grief. I didn't have any friends, to my knowledge at the time, that had gone through what I was going through. Most certainly none that were going through IVF, but I didn't even think anyone had had a loss. And, you know, it's interesting, Ryan, I'm sure with you, like if you ever mentioned it, I'm sure some of your friends were like, I've had a loss too. I've had a loss too. Then once somebody mentions it, then people start to talk about it. So anyway, I turned to Instagram, started my account, I started really kind of silently following a bunch of people and following hashtags and things, and finding people that were in the same boat as me, and just slowly built these relationships with these women that were going through the same thing I was going through. Then I was super inspired by a ton of women in the community that came before me that had turned their pain into a purpose. You know, I know that people say that a lot. So a little cliche, but that's kind of how I felt. I was like, okay, it was the only way I could make sense of why I was going through what I was going through. Like, I kept telling myself, why? And you feel sorry for yourself. You have a pity party and you're like, why? I'm a good person. Like, why is this happening to me? And so for me, that was a way of making sense of what was happening, was that I could help other people the way they had helped me. So I decided to start a podcast. And there weren't that many, there were probably a small handful of fertility podcasts at the time. And I was like, well, there's definitely room in the space for me to start one. And it doesn't seem too terribly hard. Little did I know, Ryan, right? Podcasting is harder than you think.
Way harder.
And I was like, I just need a microphone, right? And stuff to talk about. It's definitely a lot harder for everyone listening. And so Ryan, I thank you for doing this for everybody. But yeah, so I kind of figured that out. And that is how I really got connected with so many women.
You built this community for women who struggle with infertility, and then you get pregnant. Was there any sort of, I don't want to say guilt, because it's not really guilt, but was there any sort of moment where you were like, gosh, this is now isolating. I created this whole community of people that struggle with infertility. Now I'm pregnant. Do I still fit into this community? Am I still immersed with this? Like, where do I go next? Was there any moment like that?
Yes, it has been a really rough few months on Instagram at Fab Fertility for me, because what I've done is it's different than, okay, so I have a lot of friends who have big accounts in the infertility community, but they've always just been themselves talking about their journey. What I've done is I've now introduced this podcast and this blog, and what I always say is that I want to be an educational and inspirational resource for people going through infertility. It isn't just Blair's personal page. So what I really struggled with was, okay, I don't want to use the word marketing my account, but like I've been marketing my podcast and my content as a resource. That's what people come here for. My personal stuff just so happens to fit in that bucket. But it didn't anymore. And while I had so many people that were invested in my journey and truly do care and truly still keep up with me, there were a lot of people that had come along way after I had started treatments and stuff that really weren't invested in my personal journey. They were just there for the resources. So I struggled a lot, and I did feel guilt, and I felt like an imposter. I really did struggle. I was like, how do I share? What do I do? I tried to kind of emulate some things that some bigger accounts had done that I really respected. Like if I was going to talk about my pregnancy on my stories, I would put a slide up that said pregnancy related content before I would start talking so that people could skip through. And then I would say end of pregnancy related content. But then I kind of started feeling about my personal journey. I was like, well, hey, I miss sharing the day-to-day. I miss being that unfiltered me that got me here in the first place. So that's why I started Fab Motherhood, because I wanted a place for me to be able to just go and vent and share and just give everyone the day-to-day.
I think that's great. And I'm glad you found a way to incorporate all of the things you're feeling and create space for you to grow as your life grows. So I think that's really wonderful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I want to transition a little bit into those moments of infertility and how well-meaning women can show up as friends, because I know that when you are a woman watching another woman struggle with infertility, there's always that moment of, yes, I'm on the same team as you and I also struggle with infertility. Or there's the team like, oh no, I get pregnant every time I sneeze. And oh, I've struggled a little bit with some miscarriages, but I've still had children, or I've had twins. But there's moments where support comes in. And I would like to know some of the things you shouldn't say to women that are struggling with infertility, because I feel like those conversations come up, but they're not coming up with the people who say the things. And so I'm curious to know, what are some of the things you should not say to women who are struggling with infertility?
That is a great question. And I love answering this question because, like you said, within our community, we know what not to say to each other, but the people that aren't in our community don't know what not to say. So I think the worst things are the at leasts. Like, at least it was early. At least you know you can get pregnant. At least you're only 30. At least you have embryos left. At least you were at home and it was a weekend when you miscarried. Like, anything that tries to make the pain, lessen the pain by shifting perspective, while it's well intentioned, no doubt. And I have guilty of saying this still all the time, even though I know it's a trigger, because you're trying to make people feel better. And I think at the heart of it, the person you're saying it to knows that you're trying to just make them feel better and you don't know what to say. But those can be the most triggering things, because all you want to hear in that moment is, that sucks. I am so sorry. I don't know how you're feeling if you don't, but I'm here for you. What can I do for you? It's as simple as that. But I would say the at least are bad. Any sort of, as well-intentioned as it may be, uneducated commentary about what people can do to help them get pregnant. Like, go on vacation, or just get drunk. It worked for me.
Yeah, just
or
relax. Just relax.
Yeah. And then also too, like, I don't think this happens as much with people in our peer group, our age, because we know enough about infertility struggles to not say stuff like this. Is more old, like your older family members that might say stuff like this, like, well, just adopt, or just do IVF, or, what people don't realize that didn't have that as an option. They don't realize how expensive all of those different options are. It is more expensive to adopt than do IVF. It takes forever to adopt a child. It takes a really long time to do IVF. So like, those aren't like, just do those things because that's going to solve all your problems. When you introduce those things as options, it opens Pandora's box to a whole nother set of issues,
Mm-hmm. Oh, I do know. I'll never forget when my stepdad sent me a book of how to get pregnant.
Oh.
I was like, oh, like I didn't know in my 30s how to create a baby. It was really awkward. I got the book, and I'll be honest, I put it right in the trash. I was like, I don't really have room for this in my life or my bookshelf. Okay, trash. But yeah, there was a moment, and I know he was not trying to be a jerk, but in that moment, I was like, did I really just get this in the mail? Like, what? So I think it's interesting. I think people try to show up as the best version of themselves and try to be helpful, but the impact is way different than the intention. So I think it's important to realize that. So I want to talk about, now that you're pregnant, what are you most excited about for motherhood?
I am most excited about seeing my husband become a dad, and also to experience all the little firsts, like just watch a little human figure life out. I think it's going to be so incredibly crazy and sweet and special. So I'm really, really excited about that. I'm also really anxious too. I mean, when you go through infertility and you try so long to get to this moment, you worry that, like, what if I don't feel this instant connection? What if I don't feel that love that everyone talks about? What if I have postpartum anxiety or depression? What if all the what ifs, right? That can just send you into a downward spiral. So, I mean, I'm so excited about all those things, but I'm also really anxious about how I'm truly going to feel, with all the hormones and the new, and it's like, this is all I ever wanted, right? I hope it is.
That's the other thing that was going to be my next question is, what are you fearful of? Because I teach a mommy and me class, and, I would say if I have a class of 10 women, I would say 6 of them struggle with postpartum depression and anxiety. Maybe 4 of them understand they are, and 2 of them don't know they are struggling, and they won't know. And some people don't realize that this isn't something that just happens right away. You can struggle with this for years after you have a baby. And there's that fear of everything, like the expectation, right? You build up to these expectations. And then when you actually have your baby, all of those things you were talking about can, come into play. And I guess surrounding yourself with a community that will understand that, right? Of like, I don't know every mom that's jumped for joy the minute she's had a baby. I don't know every mom that got the exact birth plan that she wanted to have. And I think the more you surround yourself with people who come from different experiences and who are willing to share, I just remember breastfeeding for me. Nobody told me that it was difficult. Yeah. I would just see my friends like, oh, I got to go breastfeed, or, oh, I have to go feed my baby, or I'd be walking through the park and see these moms. And I had this grand idea of how it's going to be. And I'm like, oh gosh, awkward. And my child doesn't latch right. And now we've got reflux, and oh my goodness. And so no one talked about that. And it felt really isolating. So yeah. I'm glad that you're already, immersed in a community of people that can support you through all of these different expectations when you actually do have the baby.
Yeah. I'm really thankful too. And something I've talked about in therapy a lot is these fears. And the therapist was like, the fact that you're aware that it could happen is like half the battle, right? Mm-hmm. Knowing that you could have postpartum anxiety or depression, and it's all very normal, and knowing that it's normal and other people go through it and that there's treatment, just knowing that, which has made me feel better. But yeah, the breastfeeding stuff too has me pretty anxious. I'm like, holy crap, there's so many parts and pieces and things to learn. And I mean, I know probably once you get into it, it becomes second nature putting all those parts together. But I was putting together, I got that like Kendi system in the mail, and I was like messing with it today on the breast pump. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing?
I know I was that way too. When I got the Dr. Brown's bottles, I was like, there's 5 pieces that fit. Okay, great. I got it. Oh, now how do I wash this tiny thing? So I had that moment. But you learn, you just do it a couple times and you get it down. So yeah. Well, I am really excited for you, Blair. And I just would love to know, what is next for you?
Oh gosh, what is next? I am trying really, really hard to, get a ton of podcast episodes and content in my queue before I have this baby, so that my audience and followers don't have to have a lull in my content and stuff. So I'm working on that in the short term. In the long term.
Wait, hold on, Blair. I just want to back up for a minute.
Yeah.
Just for a second. What if there was a lull? What if you gave yourself permission or grace for you to have a lull in your community because you're embracing your maternity leave? What if?
You're right. It wouldn't be the end of the world if I put a pause on the podcast and said, hey, I'll be back with season 2 in a few months. And maybe I will do that. Maybe I'll take a month or so off, but I don't know. I know that people depend on what I do, and I don't want to let them down. Although I don't think they would view it that way. Yeah. But I don't know. We'll see. Maybe you're right.
Yeah. I mean, I have no idea if I'm right or wrong, but I know myself. I'm a busy bee. That's the persona I've put on myself. And I didn't, take those maternity leaves because I was running a company, and I would check in every day still. And I just thought to myself, what if I just invited Blair to think about that? I don't know if it's right or wrong. I have no idea what's going to service you, but what if, what is that belief? Is it true? Or is it not? Just something to think about, So,
yeah, for sure.
So, okay. So you want to get a lot of podcasts built up, and then do you have anything else that you have that is coming next that's important for you?
Yeah. So with Fertility Rally, Allie and I have really big plans for that. Right now, it's a membership platform where we host 2 weekly support groups, one for just general infertility, and then new this year, as we want to grow with our membership and grow our platform, is now we offer a pregnancy after infertility support group as well. So, and then we also host 2 annual, or I guess one in the fall, one in the spring, big virtual events. Our next one's coming up April 17th, right before this baby gets here. And it's a day-long virtual event to support the infertility community. We have panels, keynotes, breakout sessions, all that stuff. We want to keep growing. Like our original, this is like so pie in the sky, but our original like dream big thought with Fertility Rally is that we wanted to be the create and cultivate of the fertility world, where we could go around doing pop-up, this is all before COVID, of course, but go around doing pop-up in-person events all over the country, helping people out, taking advantage of all these connections that we have, people all over, doctors, other infertility warriors, to bring people together. And so hopefully in our future, there's some more in-person stuff, but for now, we're just focusing on growing our membership and growing our membership offerings. We're designing a new website right now, which is super exciting. And then over at Fab Fertility, I'll continue to do my podcast and continue to do my educational content, because guess what? When it's time for baby 2, I'll be right back in the infertility community doing IVF again. But with Fab Motherhood, I would love to grow that as well. I would love to have the audience that I have at Fab Fertility over at Fab Motherhood, and make a difference there too. I'd love to do podcasting in the motherhood space. So I don't know, we'll see. It's a lot to do when you have a full-time job. So who knows what will happen with the full-time job. I would love to just do this full-time. I really would eventually.
That's awesome. I think you have a lot of goals to work towards, and they all sound incredible. And I cannot wait to follow your journey more. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, thanks for having me. And to everyone listening, if I can help you in any way with infertility or family building, you know where to find me, Fab Fertility or fab.motherhood. I'm here for you.
Thanks so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode and you had some great aha moments. I am so passionate about empowering women, and I can't thank you enough for your support. If you know an inspiring mama, or you are an inspiring mama, send them our way. Be sure to tune in every Wednesday, and please like, follow, and subscribe to The Educated Mama. Write a review, leave us a comment, share this podcast with your friends. I'm Ryan Jordan, founder and CEO of Educated Nannies. You got this, mama.